You're live.
And good morning. It's December 2nd. Give an echo of some sort. I did. All right, are we set now? Okay, so it's December 2nd, Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee will be our last meeting before the session starts in January. And starting off our agenda today is Agency of Digital Services, and the agenda I know is a little cryptic, but essentially what we're hoping to hear from the secretary and then whomever else from ADS is sort of twofold. One, just generally the direction that they see ADS going in the near and far future. And Secretary, I'll let you sort of define the frame of that, but also to give us a perspective on the data governance framework for the state, and in particular, perhaps a little more detail on the data lake concept that we've heard periodically. So with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Riley Hughes. I know Josiah is going to be here 15 minutes or 10 minutes. So take it away.
Perfect. Thank you. And good morning to the committee members. For the record, Denise Riley Hughes. I'm the Secretary for the Agency of Digital Services, and I'm hoping if I do a audio check that you can all hear me okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Perfect. We will would like to cover what we have been working on over the last 2 years in creating some maturity in the operations and organizational structure of ADS. And then we will go into specifically one of the divisions being data and AI, what we have done in creating standards. And so Josiah is going to join at that point in time. John Kelly is also in the room. He's Chief of Staff for the agency, and he is going to be my presenter when it comes to hosting the PowerPoint. And so, John, I see you in the corner, and hopefully you can share some of the slides just for a visual. Perfect. So I see that on my end. And hopefully the committee does as well. Okay, perfect. When I joined the agency just 1 month shy of 3 years ago, we were looking at what the intention of creating centralization in IT is, creating the agency itself, and how we are structured in a way to be able to support that, and opened the opportunity for us to look post-pandemic around what the structure is or was at that moment and what it needs to be, but also looking at it from equity in service availability to the agencies, efficiency in how we deliver those services, and also a level of excellence. And there are aspects of the auditor's report that aligns very closely to how we have looked to apply what maturity looks like for this agency. And if I were to describe how we have operated as a means to support government, it has been very transactionally. And so it's easy to make decisions in the moment. And in order for us to really measure and support technology services short and long term, we really need to move to a service-based model. And so that's what we've been able to do. It has taken some time because, one, it is governed by where funds are, where they're assigned and where they're associated with, where structure existed before and where it needs to. But the concept here is really around building digital equity, financial controls, and predictability. And that all aligns to the statute that ADS is governed under and the responsibilities we have to state government. So we have looked at refining and identifying those services in three particular categories. One, from a technology support standpoint, all services will fall under two particular areas, one being core enterprise services and one being field services. And the underpinning behind all of that is looking at it from a structure of who we're supporting across state government. So we have created a portfolio alignment that I will share a little bit more detail with you in a couple of slides, but moving to more of a competency-based model, which also allows for us to hone in on deeper skilling and assigned resources that can truly understand from beginning to end how a service needs to operate in relation to the services that they're supporting, and also the process that is dictating that service support as well. John, you can, perfect. So those four underpinning pillars that really are dictating how we're doing this, and again, also aligned to the statute, is in a service-based model, staff resources and services really need to be looking more holistically across what's happening in state government so that we don't miss something, and we also don't limit what we're looking at to that point in time to be able to create some greater sustainability of those services over time. And I think that we've sometimes looked at economies of scale as a way to consider that. This sets a stage for those economies of scale so that we're not paying for the same thing over and over again in different pockets of the state, but we're looking at it more from a where we have skilling services and existing environments to be able to maximize those environments across the board. And as a small state, this is something that allows us to truly take advantage of that concept of economies of scale in a service-based model as opposed to transactional based. Because transactional, I look at more as commodity based, where it's, I'm going to keep on buying that thing over time and buy it again and buy it again and buy it again with no real management and controls around it. And in a service-based model, it's really around quality of service, the capacity of that service so that we can be prepared for scale up or scale down when we need to. And truly how an IT organization needs to operate in a large organization of what we have here. The equity piece is important as well when we do a look back on how the Agency of Digital Services was created and the structure that existed as we were aligned as an agency. Less than 50% of the departments had dedicated field resources, meaning that they didn't have staff that could meet the unique needs of that particular department or division in order to have their technology needs met. And in our new model, this actually accounts for that equity and creates balance across the entire state so that we've got shared resources, we've got shared field capacity and skilling, and where we have great successes, we should be able to repeat that across the board. I think I covered efficiency on the previous slide too, but that scale and cost predictability is critically important. And if there's one thing that I have heard year over year when I come into committee testimony around what are we doing in IT, what is the cost of IT, trying to dispel and demystify some of those costs and uncertainties and create a space of predictability so that there's a level of expectation that can exist out of the gate is something I think that we can achieve in this model. The other piece is the empowerment as well, where technology is an ever-changing industry. And in that, we're supporting every one of the departments and agencies across state government, and in sometimes all of the branches, depending on what we're supporting. So being able to have that resiliency in skill and resiliency in staff is going to be really important long-term for Vermont. think I've covered this in some of the pieces that I have already shared in the past, but centralizing core services and really defining those core services is going to be important so that we understand and know what that scale of core is. What can we expect of ADS, regardless of what the incremental or individual field needs are in each department and agency? And for example, if you have the Agency of Human Services, and you have a department like the Department of Children's and Families, they may have a very unique need that would be served by our field staff. But when it comes to the overall governance and standards and policy and controls that exist at the core of the entire state, they will have the support and coverage, as would the Public Service Department, as would name that department or branch, regardless of their ability to fund a field team of resources. And standardizing this and creating that distinction between field and core, I think is going to be really critical to be able to create that distinction around when it's unique and individual versus when it is available to all resources across the board. And it really allows us to effectively deploy those standards and adhere to those standards when it comes to technology and the security aspect of technology. And you're going to hear about the data governance side from Josiah Raish. That's one aspect of what we would consider core services. And being able to have a standard underlying foundation of governance in each of these areas, it allows us to maintain that consistency, but also create opportunities for pivot as those areas change or as those areas create risk, or if we decide that that's no longer an important area, it gives us a chance to relook at whether or not that's an important standard or service to be providing to the state. And then in a transactional model, that's a lot harder to do.
Oh, as you're transitioning, so Laura and Kath, I can't see you, so if you do have a question, just blur it out.
Got it. Thank you.
So the way that we have broken this up, so core enterprise services, you'll hear us say CES. I know we love acronyms. It's the easiest way for us to say it. There are 3 levels: essentials 1, 2, and 3, and you can see the breakout of each one. We consider that level 1 to be that the help desk support, desktop services, that tier 1, and in each one of these areas, looking at what are the services that we provide, what's the service catalog in there, how are we managing to those services, what's the quality of the service, what's the capacity, and performance as well. And so each one of these will have specific metrics to show how we're doing, but also to show if we are over-resourced in a particular area. Do we shift those resources? And it allows for better decision making when you're being asked to fund a particular thing. And it also gives you an opportunity to see where we're doing well and where we're not. And it gives me a chance to see where we're doing well and where we're not, and where we need to scale a little differently. On the 2, I can cover the details. If not, I think that John, I see you advancing the slides, but what we would consider tier 2 to be more of that essential software and hardware. So you think of our platform that is what I call our productivity platform. Everybody walks in the door being able to have access to email. They have access to storage for their personal or divisional files, folders, information. And now it allows for that consistency, how you access systems, your identity, that's all covered under that essentials 2. And then the 3 is more of the advanced tier 3 services, being foundational security, enterprise architecture, what we would consider to be the work that our business office does around the procurement and procurement standards of technology. VCGI and our GIS team that falls under data is covered under there, and also network infrastructure. So we are underway with a project that was funded by this committee on network modernization. When the agency was created, we took on the ownership of the legacy environment that existed for not only the network, but the infrastructure, the applications, the data. And when we look at the network itself, no matter where you are in which one of the 300 plus office locations, as a state employee, you should be able to access the network securely and in a way that allows you to do your job. And the network, as designed when ADS was created, wasn't really designed with that in mind. And so that project, which was a $10 million investment, is well underway. And this gives us a chance to look at the network as truly accessing state services, whether they're in the data center, they're behind the firewall, behind, sitting in one of the office spaces, or managed out in the cloud. And we're looking a little more holistically at who you are as a user and your ability to get your work done so that the service itself just becomes predictable. So the AI governance and administration, I'm going to gloss over this because Josiah is going to cover this after I am done. When it comes to these particular areas, we wanted to call it out as a specific core enterprise services category, but it truly is core. When we look at the work done both in the artificial intelligence space and the work done of the council and the division, having that code of ethics be consistent across the board is really, really important for us, not only in that decision-making process, but in being prepared for the advancements in the technology too. The data governance piece, Josiah will cover after. Before I go on, are there any questions? Perfect. So then there's an operational excellence component as well. This covers project essentials. So this is under core enterprise services. One of the things that we had not done previously is look at the work that the Enterprise Project Management Office, or EPMO, as you have heard us call it before. We haven't looked at that as being a core service. We've looked at it as, if you have a project, these are billable resources that you now have to engage. And so what we have found is that we get involved too late in the process after decisions have been made. And it doesn't always set every project or opportunity up for success. And so if we bake a component of that into core services, what you'll be able to see is engagement early in an intake process. You'll be able to see some greater structure and controls around a project before it becomes a project. And I think that you may have seen this in some of the work that has been done in supporting some of the legislative initiatives of different various task force as well. We've taken this approach throughout this fiscal year to test things out, but it's been really important to look at bringing the business architects in before a project is determined to be a project, so that all of the right proof is in place before there is either funding requested or before we have solutioned a particular technology, so that we know that we've made sure that we've identified all of the intended outcomes before we go in and fund a project. So I think looking at it as core has been important. Covered IT procurement, but the vendor relationships piece and the standardization of contracts management is really, really critical, and it's important to measure that too. Domain services, this is work that in conjunction with the Web Portal Board, the establishment and the existence of the Vermont.gov environment. I think that accessibility is something that we've talked a lot about. This falls under those domain services as well.
Secretary Riley, before you move on, I was seeing in the procurement, one of the subsections was drafting contracts. And is that just collaborative drafting of contracts, or is that something where ADS will be drafting the contracts that any of essentially the state of Vermont enters into?
It's a great question. There are two attachments right now that go into technology contracts. Attachment C and D is usually what
Yeah.
you hear them referred to as. So the existence of that, the template of those contracts is the responsibility of this agency. Drafting of the contracts is in conjunction with the agencies that we work with. And so the business requirements, the business needs, those all sit within the agencies that we support, and we will either help them validate or work alongside them. But the drafting piece comes into the technical viability, the technical details, and things that would be covered under this agency.
So essentially, the vendor would not be the drafter of the contract when you're looking at it afterwards.
Correct.
Thank you.
And security and connectivity. So this is one area that in every strategic plan, you will see security called out specifically, one from a how we fund it, what percentage of that funding is aligned to the overall IT spend, and the ability to measure that has been a bit challenging. When we look at the total spend of security, transactionally, there's really not a strong case for where our investments are. But when we look at it as a core enterprise service, looking at it from both security operations and risk mitigation, vulnerability management, those are all pieces that are critical to the security foundations of state government technology environments and infrastructure. And so we've done an immense amount of work over the last 2 years, I think to the point too where users have now expected that these things just work. And no environment is without challenges and without problems, but this gives us an opportunity to truly look at where we can mitigate some of those problems over time rather than accept them, or in some cases accept that risk if it is in the best interest of the state. So network access is falling under that as well, because being able to access a network does have the requirement first from some strong security controls. So I talked about the portfolio, and I think the word portfolio itself can be, we can say competency, we can say skills area, we can say industry, fill in the blank, but portfolio is what we have traditionally called it pre-ADS. And we've looked at 4 areas specifically. And so when I look at both core services and field services, being able to look at our abilities in these 4 areas, each one of the departments and agencies falls into one of them. So enforcement and regulation, the standards, the technology, and let's call it the connective tissue that exists among the departments that would fall under here have so many commonalities and similarities, and we're connecting the dots either through APIs or through various systems that require those same compliance requirements, require those same needs, have very similar personas to the user community. And so now to look at them under one particular umbrella also allows our resources to be able to look a little bit more holistically about the work that they're doing, so that they can see that these things are happening to the left and to the right, and as we're making decisions that they're not being made in a vacuum. Life and learning. In that particular area, we will find that we are serving a lot of the same Vermonters, whether or not it's through our employment insurance systems, education, Department of Children's and Families, that we are serving a lot of the same Vermonters. And so the need for customer care and customer service being for the Vermonter, that allows us an opportunity to do repeat experience, so that again, we can create some predictability through technology for the agencies and departments that we serve, and ultimately for the Vermonters that we serve. Administration and operations, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, but that would be any of the departments that fall under those core admin ops for state government, and then environment and infrastructure too. So we've created some connectivity that allows us to better support adjacent agencies and adjacent agencies as we are working with them and investing in technology. So that is all I have specific to the overview of what we have done. As we start the opportunity to track the measurements, those are things that I will be ensuring are in the strategic plan and the annual report from the agency as well, so that you all can see how we're doing in those particular areas. But these are things that we haven't traditionally measured in the past. But I think it's important for this committee, and I think it's important for the House and Senate committees that do a lot of work with the Digital Services Agency, so that we create a little demystification on what's happening and create a greater level of transparency for the work that's being done in this agency.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions for the secretary right now? Hand off to Saya.
Thank you all. For the record, Josiah Raish, I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer for the state within the Agency of Digital Services. I'm going to attempt to screen share here. Right. So I want to start out, the ask was around data governance. And so I'm going to hit data governance. I'm also going to talk about some of our forthcoming, our next generation data platform and the capabilities that gives, because the two things go together really well. And there are a lot of bills that I've seen over the last 2 years or so for things like a data trust or a longitudinal data system or like all of that fits really well on our new data platform. So I want to make sure that you all are aware of where we're going there. So when I think about our data program, there's really 3 goals. The first one is building Vermonter trust in government through transparency. So we run the open data portal and we do a lot of work with Vasara and all of our partner agencies on making sure that all the open data things, public records, are well facilitated. The second one is providing insights to our leaders. And then the third one is operational effectiveness. We have a lot of programs that are kind of early in maturity on using data to drive how they do their program better. And so we're really leaning on that over the next couple of years. Our data team, I'll be talking mostly about the ADS side of our data team, but Vermont's data team includes lots of people who, don't work for me, don't work for Denise. So those agency data teams are really the ones responsible for data collection and the data management activities, as well as the majority of the data analytics. In the central team, we're focusing on, as Denise was laying out in the core services presentation, making sure that privacy and governance are well established across the state, providing that data platform, and then doing publishing and analytics, especially for the smaller agencies that don't have a dedicated analytics shop or don't have an analytics shop that can meet some of the more complex needs that those agencies have. So those are things that my team handles. Cannabis Control Board is a great example of that. We're doing a pretty significant project with them to help them improve their processes. You can find very academic approaches to data governance. That is not how I roll. So when I think about data governance, I think about data being a core asset that we manage, much like our systems, much like VTrans equipment. Data is one of those assets. And so when we're thinking about our technology systems and how we consider, I'll keep using VTrans examples for a minute. They have a whole bunch of systems involved from kind of project planning all the way through construction and then monitoring. There's a variety of systems involved in that. But when we take that data first approach and think about data as the asset, we actually think a little bit less about the individual systems and what data lives in each system and more about what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, how do we measure those, then how do we construct the systems and pull data from them to meet those kind of end outcomes. That's a little bit different from kind of historically how people have thought about data, where it's like, we have this system, it generates these reports. We're now kind of beyond that, thinking about the data assets as a whole. And then data governance is about balancing two different things. So maximizing the value of the data we have, and then also ensuring that privacy and security are being protected. And I find that it really depends on the maturity of the agency, which one of those I'm more focused on, as well as the domain that they're working in. So in human services, we have a lot of conversations that start with privacy and security, and then we kind of move to how do we make sure that we are maximizing value? How do we make sure we're designing programs where nobody falls through the gaps? Things like that. Whereas at, say, public service department, we start more on the how do we maximize the use of all the data we already have, and then thinking about the privacy and security. Just depends on where the agency is at and what asks they're coming with, which one of those we start with. So our data platform and our next generation data platform consist of two pieces. So there's like operational data, not going to spend much time on that today. That's databases. We have like over 2,000 of them. There are lots. And that's, backends for IT systems. What I'll spend more time on is analytics and reporting in our next generation there. And we're building all of this out to enable our future data needs. So we're seeing increased demand for reporting and analytics that crosses multiple agencies and being able to pull things together from education and labor. Or we were working on a permitting project earlier this week, looking at all the agencies that do permits and how do we do that whole process more effectively. And again, looking at data then from 4 or 5 or 6 agencies. So I want to dive into the data lake house, which is what we're calling our next generation platform. And I want to start with just, this journey of you need a report. How will you accomplish that? And this is like both the state's journey and also like how the industry has evolved over time. So I've done a lot of reports like this. I have a system. I need a report. Build a report on the system. Works great for 1 report or 10 reports. You might be able to do 100 reports, but you might not have any hair left after that. But once you start scaling to 1,000 reports or needing to pull multiple systems together and analyze the data, you need to get beyond this. So this is where we have been for the last decade or so, is data warehouses. And I like the metaphor of a warehouse because things in a warehouse are organized, usually, hopefully. There's a lot of information about whatever's on the shelf. And there's a lot of structure to how things are stored, how things are pulled and distributed. And the challenge with data warehouses is you'll look at a source system and say, what are all the questions I might want to be able to answer from this system? And then try to build your warehouse in order to answer all those questions. The joke in the IT industry is that that's a rolling 7-year horizon. So it will always take 7 years from whatever today is in order to get that project complete. And when I started at VTrans, they were 2 years into a data warehouse. I asked them how long it would take, and they said it would take 7 years. It's been 8 years, still not quite done. That's not to say they're not getting value. There's still a lot of value that's coming along the way, but like these projects are kind of never completed. And every time there's a new thing that we're like, oh, we need to know this. And you have to go back through and build all the data structures and pull all the data in. And it takes a while to deliver the value that you want to get. So in warehousing, you spend a lot of time preparing the data, standardizing the data, and structuring it so that it can be used for various uses. Also, this is very IT heavy. There's not really a spot to plug in a business side analyst and say, here you go, build a data warehouse. So the industry looked at how data warehousing was going and said, this is really expensive and takes a long time. We need something better because sometimes we don't know everything that we want to do right up front. So they developed the model of a data lake. And I also like this metaphor because in a lake, things aren't really well organized. You just kind of have everything in there. Unlike a real life lake, the data lake we're building is very strong on security. So we do create what we call buckets, and those are very locked down as to who can see them. But beyond that, there's not much work you have to do up front to make things structured. You don't really have to clean things in order to put them in the lake. You just kind of can load stuff in. So you can take many systems and load the data in as it exists in that system, put it in the lake, and then allow business side analysts or technologists to go start doing analytics on that data. However, sometimes you still need a warehouse. So this is where we landed on with this architecture, the data lake house. And so what you can do is you can quickly load all of the data into the lake. And then the pieces where it makes sense, where there's value in building out a warehouse, some sort of reusable data structure, you can do that, but you don't have to. And then build reporting either on the warehouse or the raw data as it exists in the lake, or both. What this lets you do is, say you're replacing a system, for example, maybe an ERP system that we might talk about later today. You can load a copy of the data as it exists today into the lake, let people continue connecting to it and using that raw data in a read-only way, and then combine that in the data warehouse with data from the new system, with data from other places, and build consolidated reports. And then over time, migrate more and more of your data into the new system, and then eventually turn off the data lake, that section in the data lake. So this model provides a lot of flexibility. I kind of have a joke up there about being good, fast, and cheap. You can't actually have all three at once, but the fast and cheap line is across the top, and anything that includes good flows down through the data warehouse, where you can do that enrichment, adding additional context or information to the data so that it can be more useful. The other thing about a data lake is it enables the idea of multiple tiers of storage. So in the data warehouse model, the assumption was you need all the information available kind of right now, immediately, whenever you ask for it. And that tends to be expensive. With the data lake, you can tag some of the data as, I can wait 5 minutes for this information, or I can wait a week for this information. And that becomes much cheaper storage. So some of those, another one we've been talking with is the ACO, as that spins down, taking the data from that and putting it in the data lake so that that's still available. But that's data that no one needs to access regularly, right? It's just, if we ever need to get into it, it's available. So storing this in a data lake in cold storage costs a couple of cents per gigabyte per year. So that's kind of a much lower cost way of storing data than the way that we have done it historically. So this is the new next generation data platform that we're working on. We think this will enable a lot of use cases. The Department of Labor was looking at a data trust. The Agency of Education has some things going on in this space. Human Services and the Department of Health have a couple of use cases coming up as well. So we're working with all those agencies on scoping their projects to use this platform. Currently, thinking about the various versions of, the steps along the way, who has what. Data warehouses, Department of Health has a really big one around the registries. And Agency of Transportation, of course, has their data warehouse. Those are pretty well built out, pretty mature. And then data lakes, we implemented one at Public Safety last year to get them started. And Human Services within the Department of Vermont Health Access also implemented a data lake this year. Both of those are moving to our data lake house, to a data lake house architecture over the next couple of months. So we'll have the infrastructure in place in the next week or two. We're finishing up this project, the statewide data lake house project. And then we'll start onboarding Department of Health data, Care Board, and other agencies as they have interest. Questions so far?
Yeah, this is fascinating. We might not have complete time to go for, but we might kind of go into it. Did I hear that you said that your system might be together in a couple of weeks?
Yeah. So we kicked off. What we did was Department of Public Safety had gotten some a grant to cover the implementation of an initial data lake. And we built them kind of their own environment because of their criminal justice data really has a lot of very specific protections around it. But we built that in a way that we could take those templates and apply them in another space that we could use for a statewide data lake. So over the last, I think we're 2 months into a 3-month project. So yeah, we have 2 weeks left, I think. And this will be up and running. And we did this. We came to you all, I think it was 3 years ago, talking about the Office of Racial Equity. And this is a model that they really need because they need data shared from all over the place. And so we worked with them to establish the baseline architecture and get this up and running so that as agencies onboard their data into it, then Office of Racial Equity will be able to say, we need this data shared with us. We copy that data or give them access to that bucket, and then they're able to do their analytics from their perspective.
I'm going to open it up to questions from the rest of the community after I make this joke. So your graphic has a tidal wave in the data lake. I'm hoping that's not accurate. It could also be a shark.
Yeah.
But okay. And I keep Laura and Kath, I can't see you, so if you have questions, shout it out. So Senator Brock, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions. For example, you're somewhere in this data lake, information about you. And then it's going into a variety of warehouses. At this point in time, how many warehouses would you say your data is in?
That's a great question. Warehouses that it's in, probably not that many because we don't have that many yet. But systems that have data about you, probably there's over. And that's actually one of the projects that we want to kick off for next year. My last slide will talk about that. The big idea is called entity resolution, where we can identify Senator Brock across all the systems that you're in, and then where there's appropriate permissions, be able to surface, this program, this program, this program are all interacting with the same person. Maybe there's a better way to deliver service to them.
Well, that's again, one of the questions is how do you know it's the same person, one, and two, how do you deal with a correction of errors that you may have data about that person in one place that is different from data in another place, and what's the reconciliation process and how does that get done?
Those are two of the hard things. So the way that I approach them, reconciliation relies on a lot of subject matter expertise and rules about in this system, we store this information this way. And then we do what's called a probabilistic match to say, most likely these two are the same people. But that has to hit a certain confidence threshold before we'll accept that that is the same person. We did a project 2023 summer EBT came out, and that was a new federal program that they actually didn't want people to apply for. They gave us a list of around a dozen other programs that the state runs and said, anyone who's eligible for any of those is automatically eligible. Go ahead and issue benefits. And we had to do exactly what you're describing for all of the kids in the state, which was hard. Because if you move from this school to this school and somebody doesn't enter your name the same way, like the schools don't actually, like I can't say, hey, you have to improve your data quality because they don't report to the state in that way. So we did, at this point, a lot of manual matching in order to make sure that that happened. And Vermont's small enough, I was talking to other states about this, like I can put everybody in a spreadsheet. It's really a bad idea, but like everybody does fit. Like Vermont's small enough, we can do that. But we don't want to continue because that was so labor intensive. We want to implement entity resolution as a program so that we can handle like when we correct it over here, it's automatically corrected everywhere else. And then we can also say, this is the best data we have about this person. But one of the things we've discovered is that for a lot of programs, they actually have a requirement to keep what was submitted, even if it's wrong, or even if they've moved since then. So like you wouldn't send a letter to that person at that address anymore because they've moved and we know that. But for the purposes of the application, we have to keep what they actually provided to us. So there's a lot of complexity and nuance there. It is one of the hard things. There are tools that facilitate that as well as processes.
How does a person know that there's information in the lake or in any of the subsequent warehouses that is wrong?
Usually at today, they find that out because
Something happens to
something
them.
happens, right? Like there's a phone call that goes to the wrong, it's my old number or something along those lines. And the correction process is really manual. What the lake allows us to do is build a feed of those changes and then
Is this
propagate them out.
In existence now, or is that in the planning stage?
That's in the planning stage. It doesn't exist yet.
And will it be 7 years before it's finished?
No, that's on the roadmap for next year.
Okay.
Yeah, Josiah, could you kind of explain like your data classification approach to, so if you're dumping all of this data into the data, like how you're trying to determine like what's public information, what's sensitive information, what's like really highly critical security, information or whatever it is, like how you do that.
Yeah. So in the, let's see. I'm going to talk about this slide more in a minute. We think about the lake in 3 layers. So there's a bronze layer, silver, and gold. And the bronze layer is really just as the data exists. This is like pure data lake. As the data exists in the source system, we treat all of that as confidential. So every source system is put into a bucket that only designated people have access to, usually a data analyst and the program owner for that particular program. There could be public data in there, but we wouldn't ever tag that data as public. We build some sort of we build a view in data warehouse terms, or we'd create an extract of what can be public and publish that to the public data portal or use that in public record requests. So at the lowest, kind of in that raw stage, we really treat everything as confidential. And then as we move up through the layers, that's when we can say, oh, this is available for use across the state internally. This is available for public release. This is available, is still very, restricted and confidential. And that's how we handle that.
I guess so I'm curious. I hear the public versus confidential. I mean, that's good because I feel like some much information should be confidential, probably. But how are you tagging the sensitivity of the data and the personal information and then addressing that with like security? Because you're saying, yeah.
Yeah. So we tag things based on what statutory requirements there are around, like if there's a statutory classification. And then beyond that, we'll tag, we've developed, I think there are 8 kind of super types. So like health data, even if it's not actually HIPAA data and it's not part 2 data, things like that. We'll tag those things as health data in general, and then the specific statutory requirements that go with that. So we can make sure we're complying with the new version of MARS-E or whatever it is.
We actually have state statutory requirements for you to classify data.
Very limited. Yes, and that's
Sounds like a problem.
probably more on that coming soon.
One more question.
Okay.
Related. So I know in the past we started at the beginning of this summer, like talking about, and at the end of last session, talking about the sale of government data, of people's public data. And, I think that's a huge concern going into the next session for a lot of communities. So I'm just curious, like, if we're talking, so say like AOT data, that's an example of data that is sold in order to support systems. So I'm curious how this works with the data lake. Will still like entities and departments and agencies be selling citizens' data, depending on the level that's able to be sold and stuff, at the kind of the department level, or is there potential for the data lake to be a source for selling Vermonter data?
So far, we're not looking at the data lake to be used that way, because any data that is sold is specific extracts that we feel are best managed by those departments. We can revisit that in the future, but that's not a primary use case that we're envisioning for this.
Kath or Laura, did you have any other questions?
No.
Were you done with your presentation? I was assuming.
I think there's more.
There's a tiny bit more.
There's more. Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I've already talked about bronze, silver, and gold layer. JK may throw something at me, but the other way that I find helpful to talk about this is actually as a sewage treatment plant. So you have raw data coming in, however it exists, whatever it is, right, comes in at that bronze layer at the beginning of the data lake. And then we're actually cleaning it and enriching it and making it more fit for purpose as we get to the gold layer. And we can stop anywhere along the way. So if the intention is just that that data is the equivalent of being used for watering the lawn, we don't actually have to clean that all the way. We don't have to make that investment. We can kind of stop at the silver layer or even at the bronze layer if it's only going to be, used for purposes like that. So these are ways that we can ensure that we can continue to deliver effectively. One of the challenges with data warehouses, one of the things my team has run into over time, we build shiny things, we build more and more of them, then we spend all of our time maintaining them and don't have any time to build any more. And so when there's a new ask, now we're looking at long timelines. And we're really trying to build this from the beginning to ensure that we're engineering for that at the platform level, and then building a shared responsibility model with our partner agencies so that they can do some of the development of products that they need with the analysts that are embedded in those agencies.
I'm trying to understand that point.
Yeah.
Because when you start with the bronze layer, in which you can have all kinds of things that are wrong, are you saying that we have certain kinds of systems where it doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong?
Yeah, which was kind of
Can you give me an example?
mind-boggling to me. So Secretary of State will talk about their ministerial functions around business registrations. They have to take, they call it ministerial functions around business registration. So they have to take whatever is given to them and put it in a filing cabinet. And unless they're doing an investigation, it doesn't matter that that data is actually not the best address or the best point of contact, because they are responsible for filing exactly what they receive. So there are cases like that. And we have to take that into account when we're, say, doing entity resolution on businesses and trying to build a comprehensive, here's the ID for this business and here it is in all the systems we interact with them. We have to take that into account that certain systems, the data may not be as high quality as other systems.
About that.
When
I
they first,
understand what you're saying.
yeah, when they first walked me through that, I struggled with that one too, because I'm like, Secretary of State is the source of truth for business registration. So don't use it for that. What?
But, it
That's right.
goes back to that issue that we talked about before of you've got all kinds of data in the lake, some of which is right, some of which is wrong. And how do you decide what data to use? What's that decision process and how does it work in real life?
Yeah. So what we do,
I know, for example, if I'm looking at the Secretary of State's business records, I know that certain things are wrong. But if I've got it conglomerated into a large lake and I'm dipping into that lake and taking things out of it, systems that I'm building, how do I know that I'm taking the right things out of things that are valid and validated as opposed to just part of the sewage?
yes. Okay. That's a great question. So in the lake, everything is still in its buckets. So you can still easily tell Secretary of State data, business registrations is a bucket of its own. So it's not like you're dipping in and being like, I don't know what I got. I got something. You can still tell what the sources are. When we build the silver layer where we start looking at business rules and business logic, what we do in that layer is we look at the potential sources for this information, what we're trying to achieve, and then write rules that say, prefer this source. And if it's not available, then fall back to this source, then fall back to this source to build out the report or the data source, the data set that we're going to use to populate the new system or whatever the use case is. And that is really dependent on use case, right? What is the specific thing we're trying to achieve? And that will say, okay, the rules that we create to grab the data to get the right priority of data and pull it in to the final product. Last thing I wanted to show was, and I know this is small, we'll circulate it after, but really the timeline, and I've already actually hit on more of it than I had intended to at this point in the presentation, so it won't take long. But we really, over time, have kind of been building to this next generation data platform we have now, the statewide data governance that we are in the process of implementing. So I've been working with Human Services on getting that started for their Medicaid data warehouse project, which pulls data from, I think, 4 departments at this point across AHS and building a unified data governance model for that project with the intention of then scaling that as that data becomes available to other agencies and other agencies start loading data into the Medicaid universe or into our statewide data lake. So that's already in flight. Green Mountain Care Board also has pretty robust data governance, and I'm working with Agency of Transportation on building out governance in their space. So we have all of these individual governance projects that I'm working with. As the data lake comes online, we'll be able to pull those together and build a statewide data governance council. And then other things in 26, entity resolution, as Senator Brock and I were just discussing. And then in 27, as much as it was a lot of work, as it was hard work for our state teams, what we did with Summer EBT of automatically allowing Vermonters to receive benefits without having to provide more information, like that's the universe I want to live in. That's how I want Vermonters to be able to interact with us is like, you've already provided this information, just consent for us to share it with the new program. And you actually don't have to fill out any paper. Just tell us you're interested. And we already know enough that we can determine whether you're eligible. And in 27, that's what I see as our big push, is using the data and the data after it's gone through entity resolution to start pulling that information together and really reducing the paperwork burden on officers. And then the other thing in 27, we've already begun this, but using our platform to create views for particular policy questions. So permitting is a big one that we've been working on for the last couple of months. Education districting, another big one that my team has been working on for the last few months. And there's a lot of opportunity to start to pull data from multiple sources together, build those consolidated views, and then provide that to policymakers, both in the executive branch and you all over here. That's where I see us going.
So I'm here right now. Each system has their own data. It's essentially ungoverned, or at least governed individually per.
Individually.
And there's no overriding policy for that. You're working towards that to a certain degree. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yeah, I would say it's not that there's no policy. It's that we've leaned very heavily on the security and privacy side of things and making sure that a lot of our data lives in systems that we procure from vendors, so cloud systems. And so we have really robust controls around what can happen with the data in those systems. But what we haven't done is spent time on figuring out how can we maximize the use of this data in compliance with the statutes, policies, things like that.
Do you have any other questions from anybody? Previously.
Yeah, to try it, I don't know if this is a ADS thing or a you thing, like a specifically you thing. And maybe it's not a now thing, maybe it's a future thing, but I'm just curious, do you have like does the state have like a data strategy vision of like in 2027, you're getting to like, we can actually use data to address problems. I'm curious, like, is there some kind of report that's like, here's the problems we're hoping to address, and like, here's our vision for getting there? But also, like, I'm curious about the buy-in, not only within ADS, but buy-in across the departments, and then buy-in actually down to the local municipal level. Like, everybody has data that is one way or another feeding into state systems. I mean, even individuals are doing that directly themselves. But so I'm just curious, like, how not only, I guess, and not even just buy-in, but also literacy of like how proper data entry goes and how to handle it, and sensitivity and security. And that is like a whole state issue, not just like a ADS and then the departments. That's a everybody issue.
It is a thing that we work with departments on. So 2 years ago, there was a pretty significant challenge around AOE's report card. I don't know if you remember that. It just took a long time to get stuff processed. And it was because, as you said, lots of people who were not the state were providing data that was often not the quality we were hoping it would be. And then that was creating lots of back and forth and cleanup and stuff. And so we worked with AOE to develop a plan for how to improve the quality of their data. And we've done that with a number, like did that with Department of Labor, done that with a couple of other agencies as things have come up. As far as like a standalone document that's like, here's the state data plan. No, I don't have one of those yet. We do put our data priorities into the ADS annual report each year. So you'll see, these things will be in there along with a little bit more detail. And if you look back at the last 2 years' reports, there's quite a bit in there as well.
Cool. Are you looking to like other state, like I was looking at Oregon's just because I interact with them all the time, but and they've got a whole web portal that's like, here's our classification policy, here's our data literacy plan, here's our data strategy plan, here's all of the things. I'm just curious, like, will ADS be doing something like that?
Yeah. We may not have quite as much public facing as Oregon. I do. Catherine was their previous chief data officer. I worked with her a lot. We're also working with Washington. I swap notes a lot with Texas on the data side of things and how they approach things. I don't know if there will be quite as much public facing as some of those other states have, but yeah, that's our goal.
Just curious, why not?
It has to be handled very carefully if you're going to put some of that stuff out in the public. And because we're still in the building phase, I want to just take some time before we kind of show what's going on inside to the whole world for security reasons. We do. One of the things that we did at the beginning of the year was we created a director of data privacy. And so he's been working on a lot of the plans. I think that will be very interesting to you specifically around how do we approach data sharing? How do we do when we are selling data? How do we do that better and make sure the use is very narrow? And just, he's a lawyer. He's providing that kind of legal review to all of those types of things that just wasn't happening before. So he's working on the next updates to our data classification program and working with security on turning that into a policy and then putting the controls around.
Last question. Thinking about other states, like the plans I've been looking at, like there's reference to like working with the legislature, like in alignment to like a vision that there might be, then like working with the legislature to figure out what needs to be statutory and what's policy. It feels like generally we really rely on just doing policies and not really doing requests for statutory. And like I said, it sounds like I don't know that the state has any type of classification statutory requirements other than like federal, like you mentioned HIPAA, like their federal classifications. So I'm just curious, like, what is your vision for engaging with the legislature back and forth on like things that really should be statutory? Like I'm assuming you're not going to be here your whole career, but you're setting up important systems that you might want to make sure stay in place or follow certain lines. Like, so how do we work together to do that looking forward?
Yeah, we've started to draft some of that. One of my holiday projects is going to be pulling together some of that language for what we might be looking for. Don't have it yet, but we've got some notes on where we think the highest priority items are, and happy to work with you on that.
Great. And with that, I was going to say, I'm looking forward to hearing more of this during the session. It is a big topic that we did not touch on, at least during the off session. And I've gone past.
This was it. So
my draconian way of addressing the agenda, I've avoided. But Rep. Sebeli, you've got a question? Might be muted.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Nope. No audio source. Wait. No.
And this is probably why I didn't call on you when you spoke up. Not going to be able to.
Okay.
So with that, we'll move on to.
Just a question. We have the presentation that you've done. I don't see it in the meeting.
we'll send it over.
Right, both of them.
I got the first one, but
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we'll move into our next agenda item, which is just cross-branch communication. And this is the three branches of government. Obviously, we've heard a great deal from ADS, and ADS obviously is the executive branch is obviously the biggest branch, but there are three co-equal branches. And I wanted to hear from each about how you all communicate amongst each other about all things IT. And I was hoping that this would be something of a discussion, but I know that Kevin Moore won't be able to be here until 11:15. So, we have Joe, Marcia, Denise, everybody kind of come to the table who is going to be speaking about this, and we can start off with Secretary Riley Hughes to just sort of go over what you see as the communication. Yeah, come on up. I know it's a little difficult having a conversation at a table with folks that are online and not online. So Secretary Riley Hughes, start talking to us about how you all communicate.
Perfect. Joe Paquin has graciously set up a Teams recurring meeting that our joint teams will attend. We've got the Chief Information Security Officer for my team, the Chief Technology Officer, and sometimes if the deputies or somebody from Josiah's team needs to attend, we'll have them. But it's typically security and access focused. In emergencies or challenging situations, Marcia, Kevin, and I all have each other on speed dial, as well as Joe. And so we will have the chance to be able to connect there. I think that we recently had a situation where Judiciary identified that one of the data feeds that they had coming from a system that my staff manages was broken. Marcia reached out to me after the teams had been working on it to make sure that I was aware, which was great. And I think it was a matter of 3 or so hours. And through joint troubleshooting, my team helped identify, a situation in their network environment that was blocking traffic, and they worked together to resolve it. So I would say that the communication and collaboration is at the moment consistently standard. But as far as what you had heard me share at 9:30 around how we're working on the organization and operational changes, I'd like to make sure that I've got folks on my team that can more regularly work with folks on Marcia or Kevin's team if they're aligned in those particular areas. So, our desktop and support services, I know that that's a quite a bit of work that Kevin's team does. Same with Marcia, now that Judiciary is managing things independently on their own, making sure that we can regroup on some of the architecture and design of those systems so that everybody's aware of where those connection points are, so that when systems go down, that we're all clear on where troubleshooting needs to be and that we're not going in blind. So I think there's some opportunity for growth in those spaces. But as far as where our various roles and responsibilities lie, given I think it's bi-monthly meetings, although I can't attend all of them, the teams have been in constant communication. So I'm pleased with that. And I don't think I have anything else to add.
Marcia or Joe wanted to give us something from the judiciary perspective. I'll have some questions afterwards, just so you know.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. I'll go for Joe and then you could fill in a little bit. So I do agree Joe did set up meetings. I had originally, and then Joe took that on, and I think Joe's in monthly.
Monthly, yep.
Monthly, yeah. And I do feel we could have better participation from ADS. And Denise, I know you weren't able to make the last meeting, but JT's report was, I have nothing to report. And I mean, we're kind of like sharing, I'm just, being very open here. We're sharing things that are happening in the judiciary's IT realm, and the legislature did the same. And I just know there's absolutely, it can't be nothing going on in ADS. So I think maybe we could plan, I don't know. But he was the only one who attended, and I think that there could be more information sharing. I'll just put that out there. And I also, I agree. I probably should have addressed the issue that we had recently with the data exchange sooner with you, because there actually was an issue. It wasn't, in the end, there was something to get it going again that was on our side, but the initial issue was on the ADS side. And I haven't followed up in this in writing because I just haven't had time, but I plan to. And what actually got it addressed was a contact that Joe knew that he got involved, and then we finally figured it out. But we had a lot of trouble getting to the right person for about two to into the third day. So I think that's another area where maybe we need to streamline how we do support without having to get to the CIO level. And or I mean, it went, by the time it got to us, it had gotten resolved because it came to me and I got Joe involved who knew somebody, which was lucky. So I think that there, in both cases, there is communication, but there's definitely room for improvement. Oh, and the third area would be when there's a security issue. Um, like what had happened, recently where VTHR wasn't working. I would love to have better IT communication versus having to find out about it through HR. Our initial contact about that was through our HR man.
Joe, did you have more?
No, I think just from a clarity and Denise, you brought up like a reorganization within your organization, just figuring out how do we make sure that, I'm in contact with JT and Rain and making sure that these things are, we're in lockstep with each other because we're all serving the same constituent base. We're all trying to deliver services to the best of our ability for Vermonters. So I think as much collaboration as we can. I definitely would like to see more participation just in those monthly meetings. Our two branches, legislative and judiciary are pretty small, so we don't have large IT teams, but there's definitely a lot of, my role covers infrastructure and desktop support and cybersecurity, and I should be interfacing with those three individuals within ADS type of situation. So trying to figure that out.
I'll have a sort of a broader question in a moment, but Marcia and Denise, you mentioned a specific issue. Was that something that was an issue that sort of cut off what judiciary would be able to do, or would it be something less crucial to the core services of the judiciary?
So that was data exchanges between us and the executive branch with anything within the GlobalScape environment. So these data exchanges can be as simple as, here's this person's license that's been reinstated, but it can be as serious as child welfare cases going to DCF. Like there's a lot of data that interfaces between the two branches.
Could have been a mission critical. Is it?
Yes, and included public safety as well.
Oh, yes.
So my broader question, and Rep. Sibilia, I'll get to you in a moment, but what I'm hearing is that there's some informal communication. I'm just wondering if there's any more formal structures, and this would be different committees, different task forces that all three branches sit upon. That would be a mechanism of communication. Are there any of those right now?
No.
That any of you know? Okay. Okay, Rep. Sibilia.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do wish Kevin was here. I want to say for myself that the reports that we received from the three branches about the incident with the HR systems, I found to be wholly unacceptable how the communication went on that. And that there is a lot of work that can be done around process, around documenting. And I am very interested in hearing particularly from the administration, who really has a much wider set of obligations here, how we can ensure better performance, better connection with the other branches. And I'd like to, I guess I would like to, I know that we're not going to be able to speak specifically about some of these items here in open session. But the communication between the branches in particular, really not okay. And I am interested in how to improve that. Legislators have really one tool, which is passing law. I think it'd be great to hear some thinking about agreements or MOUs or I don't know, best practices that the three branches are able to come up with together, given that you do all serve the same constituency, which is Vermonters. So I guess that's all that I have to say. I wish Kevin was here as well. And I certainly do hope that this is an item that we choose to communicate about to our counterparts on the regular committees, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Anyone from the committee have any questions right now? Because I was thinking what we might be able to do if folks are open to this, we take a 10-minute break and we can see if we can reach out to Kevin and have him be here a little earlier than he had expected, so we can have this conversation and see where it goes and maybe have some thoughts on Rep. Sevilla's question. So without any unless I hear any objection, we're going to take a 10-minute break right now and we'll reach out to Kevin.